Let's go to Sam Armstrong, who's a commentator. He's joining me throughout the show. Markets been plummeting. FTSE 100 plummeting by almost 6%. These are big drops. We've seen Hong Kong, Japan, everywhere. We've seen these markets go down. We're going to be seeing them, in America too. Now, this is on the EU markets. This is going to have an impact. It's a direct, clear impact of those tariffs. Fears of a global recession, fears of a global tariff war. In particular, of course, after China retaliated, how could they not? 34% tariffs they've added on to that as well. Where do you think this ends?
Well, the only honest answer I can give you, Julia, is I don't know. Anybody talking about it on the television doesn't know.
Yeah, he claims they know.
Keir Starmer doesn't know, and perhaps most worryingly of all, I don't even think Donald Trump knows. Yeah. Trying to predict this man is incredibly difficult. It could go any which way. I mean, in the last hour or so, even Elon Musk has posted some slightly guarded criticism of Donald Trump over these things.
He's a free marketeer, isn't he?
He is. And
as the Republicans used to be.
As the Republicans used to be, and boy, oh boy, has Donald Trump turned everything up on its head. The only thing I can hope is that our government is smart enough to try and make the most of this opportunity rather than doggedly sticking to the world it wished did exist, which was that world that existed while we were still in the EU.
Let me just read a latest post on Truth Social by Donald Trump. This was in the last 15 minutes before we go to our next guest. Our oil prices are down, interest rates are down, the slow-moving Fed should cut rates. Food prices are down, there is capitalised no inflation, and the long-time abused USA is bringing in billions of dollars a week from the abusing countries on tariffs that are already in place. This is despite the fact that the biggest abuser of them all, China, whose markets are crashing, just raised its tariffs by 34% on top of its long-term ridiculously high tariffs. Not acknowledge my warning for abusing countries not to retaliate. They've made enough for decades, taking advantage of the good old USA. Our past leaders are to blame for allowing this and so much else to happen to our country. Make America great again. Well, let's talk about that with Matthew Bryza. He's a former White House senior State Department official who worked in the Obama administration. Matthew, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Julia, great to be with you.
Thanks for this. Well, look, the tariffs haven't caused a problem for the US. No one should retaliate. He's warned people about doing that. There's no inflation. Everything's fine. It's going to all make America great again. Do you agree?
Well, very much not. I mean, the reason why oil prices are down is because there's such turmoil in global stock markets and fear among those who need to invest in new factories, new plants, that the world is unpredictable. Therefore, there's a great fear of a recession, maybe like during the COVID period. And so, no, I think what he's doing is creating such disruption that nobody knows how to act and how to keep the global economy going.
And that's the worry, isn't it? And we talked about this so much last week when he made the announcement. This is about, he is the great disruptor. That's what he does. And he's put, just basically knocking out the old economic order and starting again. The question is, does he really know what he's doing? There was a big question mark about the algorithm and the plan and how they'd actually come up with these tariffs, because he was claiming these are reciprocal. So these are half the tariffs which these countries are putting on us. But some of the countries put tariffs on, 10, 20%, or countries like Australia, where they have a free trade deal, there are no tariffs. So, they can't cut their tariffs. So if you cut your tariffs, they will drop ours. But they can't cut their tariffs because they haven't got any. So it didn't make sense, an awful lot of it. Also, it's the idea that countries that are exporting more to the US are somehow exploiting America. But of course, America is such a huge economy and a very rich economy. They can afford to buy more stuff than, say, your average Cambodian living in a mud hut. I mean, I've been to Cambodia. This is not a rich country. They're making a lot of stuff now, they're exporting it, but they're still a growing, developing economy. The idea that those people will be able to import high-priced American goods at the rate that America can import low-priced Cambodian goods is absurd. So is it just that he doesn't really understand how world trade works, or is he kind of looking beyond that to say, I just want trade that benefits the US and only the US, full stop?
Well, I think for certain he doesn't understand how global trade works, and the whole idea of it in the centuries since World War II is if you open up markets, if you have free flows of people and capital, labor and capital, then you allow countries to produce according to their competitive advantage. They produce those goods and those services that make the most sense for their economy, and then they try to trade those and export those. And that's always been good, even for Republicans and Democrats alike, although there are market distortions that need to be corrected. And that system has really served the cause of global peace well. You think back to the 1930s, and one of the, I think the main causes for the rise of Nazism, right, was the Great Depression, poverty, the terms of the Versailles Treaty that put such burden on Germany. And then afterward, we learned our lesson. And we wanted to look at trade as a way to bind us together and eliminate the threat of war, allow economic competition instead of war.
Well, there was that idea with China, wasn't it? That we'd trade with China. This was something that, all Western leaders were talking about. We'd open up with China, and as they got richer, they would drop their dictatorial, global ambitions, and and that would be good. That hasn't worked out that well. It's got richer. They can fund their military. They are a global threat to democracy, global threat, certainly a threat to Taiwan. But, there has been an issue with it where they follow policies where they've got very, very cheap, coal-fired energy, and they can provide all the goods that we want much cheaper than we can. It does destroy our manufacturing. There is an argument for bringing back manufacturing. And certainly, America's kept an awful lot more than we have. I mean, we've barely got a steel industry anymore. Our energy prices are 4 or 5 times the American energy prices. We are in a serious issue. What do you think that, leaders like Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron or the EU leaders, what do you think they should do to respond to this? What is best for their relations with the US, which will be important long term, but also in terms of their own economies?
Yeah, and I mean, in the short run, I think they ought to fight back. Because if they don't, the tariffs are just going to keep coming, and this whole international system that we talked about that pays political benefits as well will be gone forever, which it may be given the fact that the U.S. credibility is so shot.
But hold on a sec, we fight back. If Keir Starmer puts 10% on U.S. goods coming to the UK, that just makes goods coming from the USA that I or any of my audience buy 10% more expensive, just as Donald Trump has just done that for people in America. Making prices more expensive for your people doesn't do you any good.
I very much agree, but this is a political argument now. It's no longer an economic one, right? So Trump faces a race against political time right now because the short-term impact of these tariffs is going to be really difficult for Americans. And already for those who have 401k retirement accounts, they're losing a lot of money. Inflation is going to increase, even though he promised on day one to decrease inflation. If in the long run, his theory is right, though, that tariffs will rebalance trade, manufacturing will return to the U.S., the U.S. economy will prosper. Okay, great. But it's going to take a long time for that to happen. So it's a race against time. And if Prime Minister Starmer, for example, and others, Macron and others, fight back and say, look, politically, you're losing this battle, President Trump. We're just going to fight back, and it's going to be a race to the bottom. I think that's additional weight that's going to move the political needle in the United States back toward him having to drop this trade war.
But surely the only thing he's going to care about is his support in. I mean, he wants to obviously be a popular president. He also will have a lot of pressure from Republicans. The midterm elections, again, they're only next year. These things creep around very, very, very quickly. He's got control of Congress right now, both houses. If he was elected, people always think it was all about woke and immigration. It wasn't. It was about the cost of living. It's always about the cost of living. I speak to Americans all the time, but even well-to-do Americans who are doing well in life, who are saying you will not believe inflation. If you've been to America on holiday, everyone I know goes just Disneyland or whatever. They are absolutely flabbergasted by how expensive America is. Whereas we used to go to America and go, wow, this is so cheap. Everything, food, hotels, buying clothing and stuff, it's so cheap. It is not a cheap country anymore, and Americans are feeling it too. If he doesn't deal with the cost of living, and tariffs are likely to put up the cost of living, as you say, not just in the short term, but the next few years, then he's going to lose both houses. He's been a lame duck president for 2 years, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, and he's being warned that by, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas said the same thing. He said, if this continues, there's going to be a bloodbath at the midterm elections for the Republicans. Yeah. And there are some Republicans that are starting to resist. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa is really worried about the impact on farmers. So he's trying to pass legislation that will claw back tariff-making authority back to the Congress rather than for the president. So, and as you said, I mean, tariffs are taxes, and tax authority lies with the Congress, but the Congress had delegated to the president the ability to raise tariffs. So there's a backlash beginning among Republicans, and many of his own voters who are going to see their retirement accounts plummeting in value are going to be against him.
Yeah, that said, he'll say, look, we have already got some big firms that are saying they're going to move their factories to the US, which wouldn't otherwise have come. But again, these things can often take an awful lot of time, and when things are so uncertain, people don't want to do that. I mean, I've been accused I can say 10 things that I think I like that Donald Trump has done. If I say one thing I think I don't like, I'm immediately accused of Trump derangement syndrome by the people who've really got the Trump derangement syndrome, because the Trump devotion syndrome is kind of, just as maddening. I mean, I judge people for what I think works, and I've got an economics degree. I've got a vague understanding of how these things work, but there are a lot of people who say, look, Donald Trump had to do something. The offshoring of industry in America is, it's all very well people having cheap prices, not they've got cheap prices anymore, but actually people haven't got jobs, and you're losing those sort of working class jobs, and you're not replacing them with anything. Something had to be done. And the argument that, Donald Trump is disrupting things, he's shaking it all up, and when it's all done and dusted, America will come out all right, because at the end of the day, America is the driving force of the world economy. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, well, I think it's a question of, as you say, it's a race against time. I think he's right that there are disadvantageous relationships the U.S. has on trade with a number of countries, but he blames Canada and Mexico. Yet he said that he negotiated the most successful trade agreement in history last time around with Canada and Mexico. Yeah. So definitely there needs to be remedies to disadvantageous on their trade approaches to the United States. But the problem is he's rushing this through so quickly, so radically, and disrupting everything that it is costing the American economy dearly. And maybe a more thought out approach in which the actual objectives would have been coordinated and clearly articulated would be a better way to go.
We shall see how this all works out, Matthew Bryza, former White House and senior State Department official. Apologies for the quality of the sound at the end. I think the microphone got moved. The fun we have with tech these days. Sam Armstrong, I mean, he's not a Trump supporter. I think one of the things I find really frustrating about this debate is blind devotion to everything Trump does as good, or blind refusal to accept that some of the things a lot of the things that Donald Trump's doing are good. And I find it so infuriating. You just get abused, from either side, as opposed to just saying, is this a good policy? Is this a sensible policy? There is an argument, and I do understand what people are saying. All the experts say this is a terrible idea. Yeah. Well, a lot of people say, those experts have been calling a lot of things over the years. Yeah. They've been wrong about they're the experts who said you shouldn't leave the EU. Yeah. Remember those job losses we were going to have when we left the EU? Yeah. Then you got all those experts who told us that we were all sort of, saying the wrong thing when it came to COVID policies and the like. And again, that was all, most of the stuff they were spouting was abject, unproven lies, absolutely absurd. And then you get to things like climate. Honestly, virtually everything. People saying, net zero and green jobs. This is all it's abject nonsense. Yeah. It's all untrue. So I can really understand why people say, and immigration and economic benefit. The experts have been telling us stuff for years across the board that these things are good for us, and they're often not good for us. They're often untrue. They're not unproven. So I can understand why people don't trust the economists and the experts in business saying these tariffs were better. There is an argument that maybe something good will come of it. Yeah, and
let's be clear what is not tenable, which is the status quo. People in this country, people in the West, everywhere you go, have been feeling themselves get gradually poorer over the last 30, 40 years. They can feel it, they can see it. And look, it's fine if you're in high finance. It's fine if you're in academia. It's fine if you're in one of these ivory towers. But for millions of people, things have been getting worse. And they're the people. We live in a democracy. Yep. And they voted for change. And who are we to say? In the end, I actually get quite nervous when all economists are united on something.
Yes, exactly.
Because the one thing you know about economics is it is such an imprecise science. It is based on things that nobody understands, and there are no firm, real, absolute conclusions. Yep. So who knows? Donald Trump might be right. I suspect, on balance, this is going to be a minor net. I think there's going to be some benefits. I think there's going to be some costs. But nobody that is going on television today and saying Donald Trump is all bad and all the rest of it knows enough to tell you, absolutely guaranteed, that they're right and he is wrong. And Donald Trump alights on a real problem, which is people are and have been getting poorer while they have been told they're getting richer, and enough is enough.
And people,
is
they
enough.
know. I say it's really interesting that the average American voter has not had an increase in their standard of living for 20 years. And everyone goes, these figures are America's so much richer than us. It is so distorted by the number of billionaires they have, who have huge amounts of money. And again, if their incomes are going up, but if inflation goes up more,
but Julia,
then I'm sorry, it doesn't cover it.
If you think that's true over there, you should have a look at here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
This country has got massively poorer GDP per capita. When you take out immigration, America's got about 30-40% richer since 2008. We've stayed the same. So if you want to see where this country is going in terms of politics, if you think Donald Trump is radical, this country is staring down the barrel of big political and economic
And you see what's happening in Germany, in France, in Italy and elsewhere. And again, these people are all the creations of the left the so-called moderate centre ground, who think that basically open borders and mad net zero policies and taxing us to the hilt and all of that they're not the moderates, they're extremists. The centrist dads, they're the radicals, they're the extremists. We're just talking about some sensible policies that actually make sure that ordinary people, who are the people who the governments are supposed to help. You don't have to help rich people, they're doing fine. But just ordinary people who are getting up and going to work and getting their kids and going to the supermarket, just that they should be, so you work hard and you do your bit, you should be better off. You should be better off than your parents, your kids should be better off than you. And if that doesn't work, the American dream or the British dream as it should be here, then something has to give. I mean, again, I'm trying to keep my mind open on all this. I don't think it's going to work out well for Britain, certainly. I don't think it's going to work out that well for Donald Trump. But I don't think he has a plan, but he can change his mind at any time, so things could change. I don't know. There may be a whole big plan involving China. Who knows? But we should keep our minds open. But I just think everyone, if you're blindly loving it because Donald Trump has done it, or you're blindly hating people who criticise it because it's Donald Trump that did it, you're not paying attention. That's all I'll say.